Please welcome Alan Bourne, Director at Fairmount Partners.
Our next session is a conversation between Rajendra Prasad and John Guillaume. RP, I should say, is a Senior Managing Director and the Global Automation Lead at Accenture. He heads a team that helped organizations across the globe successfully implement and scale their intelligent automation transformations. He has spent over 2 decades innovating and defining frameworks for driving efficiency and managing change in software engineering. He holds multiple patents and built Accenture My Wizard, an AI-powered intelligent automation platform. He is also co-author of the 2021 book, The Automation Advantage, published by McGraw-Hill. And John Guillaume is the Chief Design Officer at Comcast Business. Through modern product design and development approaches, John and his team set out to discover opportunities for breakthrough customer experiences and product innovation. John has 25 years of product leadership, operating and development experience in technology and telecom services. And outside of work, John is active with his family, enjoying most things outdoors, including running, cycling, and golf. So, ladies and gentlemen, RP and John.
Hello again. Some of you heard me in the morning. So what we'll do is we'll spend 10 minutes. I'll talk through some of the slides and the material, and as I got introduced, I have written a book on automation. It's called Automation Advantage. It covers many topics, what we discuss throughout the day about automation. And I'll introduce few topics, then we'll have Q&A, and we'll go from there. Yeah. Why automation? Right? Today, entire day, you might have heard many terms. Why do we need to do automation? Like customer experience, operational cost savings, efficiency, speed to market, systems resiliency. If you look at all of these terminology, those are traditional systems, software, IT thinking. In addition to that, when we implement automation, it delivers all of these benefits. And we all do for different business reasons. But that's the most important aspect, is to understand why we need to do automation. Once we do that, what are the typical challenges of automation? Like most of you know, I know a lot of you travel in the airline industry. Most of the accidents happen while takeoff or while landing. And similarly, any systems projects, while taking off, it will get into trouble, and then they shut it. Most of the time they don't even get into the cruising altitude. Those of you know Watts Humphrey from Software Engineering Institute in CMU here, he always says, if you don't know where you are on a map won't help you. So it's very similar to the process implementation journey or automation journey. So it's important that you understand where we are, where the enterprise is with respect to automation journey before we get to that. Like someone speaking in the morning sessions, right, there's a lot of technical depth or application depth. I call it as a process depth, tooling depth within the organization, because nobody wants to take out a tool that is being implemented. Nobody wants to change a process that is being implemented. So it's quite difficult to kind of address this. So this is one of the biggest challenge when you want to do automation. People want to kind of work around in the same area. And then a lot of time there is a high dependency on the pockets of knowledge within the organization. Right? A lot of people contain the knowledge. You need to, difficult to kind of automate them. So these are some of the very critical challenges that you face while you are implementing automation. How do you start? How do you take a large enterprise through automation journey? So most of you, those of you are familiar with this maturity framework, be it capability maturity model, CMM, software CMM, CMMI, or PMI methodology, any of those methods if you look at. We came up with a automation maturity framework. very important aspect of automation is, if you don't need an AI model, you don't need an AI model. You can just do it with a simple process change or a script or a small utility that can address that. Don't need to do AI because it's fancy and everyone does AI. Similarly, if before you get to the automation, step 1 is optimize your process. Why? If you have an inefficient process in the enterprise and if you automate your inefficiency, you actually fueled your inefficiency to run more efficiently. So, you don't want to do that. So, you want to make sure that your processes are first optimized. So, this is how you go through the maturity journey. You get the tools driven, simple script based automation to process optimization, process automation. Then you think about robotic process automation. The RPA that we talk about is at maturity level 3. And then comes the data. In those of you who are at lunch session, you know that data is very critical aspect. Most of the organization capture a lot of data. Once you capture the data, it is not necessary that it is ready for consumption. So, if you go through the data life cycle of capture, curate, consume, before you build a machine learning model, before you build the AI model, before you infuse predictability, you have to get your data strategy right. Remember one thing, AI is nothing but an UI for data. AI is an UI for data. So, if you don't get your data, your AI is going to be bad. So, this is how you want to do. Most of the people ask me, do I need to go step by step or can I just directly go to AI? You may have to go to step by step. You should not be jumping to AI without understanding the processes, the data, taking out the repetitive process, building the predictability, and then think about recommendation engines, AI engines, getting your AI efficiency. If you skip any of these steps, you will get something in the organization, you will probably add to the technical depth through AI. You are adding a lot of AI which is not useful in the enterprise. So, this is how we recommend to go through this maturity journey. And as I said, while you are going through the maturity journey, the number one thing is pause and benchmark yourself where you are in the journey. That is the very important step, alright. And then how do you make automation work, right? In my book we have a lot of practical tools, techniques that we talk about to make automation sustain. How you start absolutely matters. I know I cannot stress more than this. Most of the organization that we interact with, they just don't want to spend 4 weeks of that initial step. Plan the plan. It is not just planning. Planning the planning is very, very important. The first 4 weeks of checking everything, benchmarking, baselining, identifying where you are is very important. Once you get it start right, it also defines your plan, your governance, your measurement framework, your KPIs. It's not systems KPIs, right? If you are running a large complex systems development, if your status report is always green, but everything else your business users are not satisfied, that means you have a watermelon effect. Outside it looks green, inside it is red. So, the project is not working. So, you have to get your measurements and KPIs, data, all of that is starting right. Value over volume. You don't need 1000 bots. You don't need lot of solutions in place. You need to look at where is the maximum effort, the maximum return on investment to the benefits. It has to be business led and technology enabled. Don't do technology led automation. It's just not, that means you just because you purchased a license for a particular tool, don't do automation. That's not the way it works. It has to be business led and technology enabled. Take it beyond robotic process automation. It's just not about bots. You have to go beyond RPA, and you have to look at automation in the software engineering, automation in the HR, automation in the procurement, automation in the supply chain, automation in IT. If you look at everything, right? Be agile, be continuous. It keeps changing. The world keeps changing. So you have to always look at what's changing in the world of automation and what's changing within your enterprise itself. Don't run automation as a quarter theme of the quarter, and then next quarter it's a different priority. Last but not least, the talent. The two lenses to the talent. One is the talent of your core business, and the second element is the talent of automation teams. Both are very important. You have to build your automation team with your best resources in the company. You can't have someone who do not have a critical job to give them manage automation for a couple of months, will come back to you with a real job. It doesn't work that way. It is a career, and you have to invest in the talent. You have to build the profiles, the skills, the expertise on the automation. So these are some of the tips on how you manage this. Finally, change management on the people dimension, the technology dimension, and the process dimension. I'm not going to deep dive. We can pick it up in the discussion and the dialogue. But the critical aspect is the mindset in the organization has to be the culture of the organization has to be automation first culture. And the only way you accomplish that is by making sure that your employees are involved in decision making of what to automate, when to automate. How to automate can be somebody's decision. You can use any technology, but when to automate and what to automate has to be a joint effort with the employees. All right, that's kind of what I wanted to leave with. Now we can get into the discussion and any questions. And those who ask the best question, I have my book as a giveaway, so we'll go from there.
There we go. We'll start off. I'll kick off a couple questions with RP, and then we'll ask you all for any questions you might have, but we'll get the conversation going. So thank you for this, RP. So we were chatting in back, and I mentioned to you, one of the things that we see all the time, I see, right? You can't see a press release, a new company, a Fortune 500 company, an app that has AI ML built into it, right? It's all the buzz, and you would think, as was looking at your maturity scale, right? You would think that everybody's already there, but we know in fact that is not the case.
Correct.
To me, this feels like tip of the iceberg and a lot of opportunity, but is the industry like at the first or second stair in your maturity model, and where are we? And then perhaps could you share an example of maybe an organization that is very mature in how they've implemented?
Thank you, and I know that's the best question. That's why I gave you the book before. Thank you for that question. So there are two aspects to the question that you asked. One is that where is the industry today and how the organizations view it. In my view, today, lot of organizations do understand the philosophy and the principles of AI. If you look at the tech companies and the businesses that are completely dependent on not a lot of AI, but few of the AI techniques, like a recommendation engine on your shopping application, that's the area where they need a lot of data. They harvested the data, they build the model. There are companies that are on the other end of the spectrum who has a lot of legacy applications that are still built on mainframes and COBOL, DB2. Those of you are working on Python, C++, R, on all of that. Today, 50% of the software systems still across the globe run on DB2 mainframe applications, modernized through a front end of different technologies that exist. But the database, and I saw AI ML solutions for mainframes is the biggest area of research. Those of you have your resume with COBOL, DB2, CICS, those things, it's still very valuable because we need that kind of skill set. The reason I pick up the legacy side and the modern tech is the companies have a different spectrum of automation on the AI in that space. The organizations that are in the middle, who has a mix of the every technology, or the organization that struggle in implementing AI and in a very structured way, primarily because there is a mix of everything. That is where the stratification of the technology stack, identifying the prioritization, looking at the strength of the data within the systems becomes very critical to establish an automation journey, automation map. So to answer your question, industry today understands it. There are 3 lenses to it, and the enterprises that are in the middle are the ones needs a lot more help in the AI and automation space.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that I picked up on in your presentation was process needs to be sorted out first before perhaps machine learning and AI gets applied. Otherwise, you may be optimizing broken process.
Absolutely.
Now, for larger organizations, especially legacy organizations, process is a 4-letter word in many organizations. There's this, there are certain challenges around that. And for me, that was one of the things that was really interesting is on that maturity scale, you have to start with foundational items in order for it to be, ultimately AI ML to be effective.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of work depending on the size of the organization, maybe the tech debt that an organization might have, and I know you talk about cultural challenges and even egos getting in the way, right? But that's so important. What would you suggest for someone who is interested in taking a company on this journey? How do you establish those foundational items first? How do you sell that to the organization?
No, absolutely. There is a very important element in the organizational process management. Like, I am a strong believer in, though by career I am on automation side, I built my career from process management side. So most of the organizations, whenever I say we should optimize the process, they think they will take an existing process, put a band-aid to the process, it's broken. And after a couple of months, they'll put another band-aid. That's not process optimization. One of these days it will completely come out and then you'll have a bigger problem to manage. And it has to be, there's no silver bullet to this. Someone in the leadership team has to stand up and say, this process has served our purpose, brilliant, thank you. You as the process owner, I want you to completely redesign and present to me what will be the better and new process and give it back to the owner of the process. You don't design the process for them. You ask the person who is responsible for the current processes to redesign that. That technique most of the time works. Assuming that the person has been taken care and their job is not impacted, their career is not impacted, that technique always works. Sometimes even that technique won't work because there's a lot of pride in the way the process is written by the person who is sitting in an enterprise. So then what do we do? The second technique is the leadership team has to say that you have to take the emotion out of the discussion. The way you do the emotion out of the discussion is through the data. In God we trust, rest all bring data. This is what Dr. Deming says, right? So you have to put the data in the place to say, this process ran this year, this is the revenue, this is the impact on our earnings, this is our losses, this is our profit, this is our contract income, here is how it is impacted. This is the trajectory, downward trend for last 6 months or last 8 months, last 5 quarters. It's our time to relook at it. And then I think the organization will follow.
Yes.
So that's kind of.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. You kind of reframe the problem, not that we need to implement AI ML. No, I'm reframing the problem that we have a business challenge, and in front of that is a business opportunity. Here's what it looks like.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the, at Comcast, when I started having discussions with some of our AI ML teams, it was a learning process for me also to really understand the mindset of where to start. And one of the things is you reframe, one of the things that I think it's easy to get caught in the trap to is a desired business outcome. I want this desired business outcome. It could be selling more of this, or reduction in some kind of cost, or what have you. And the quick retort from the team has always been, what problem are we trying to solve? And my team, we're a big design thinking shop, right? And it's one of the most important questions you can ask in design thinking. What problem are you trying to solve? And so it was kind of come back at us, and it was a really good one. So it was, instead of focusing on the business outcome, what's causing the business outcome, or what may cause the kind of the opposite of the business outcome. And that was again like a shift in mindset of how to think about AI and ML from a technology to end up with a result, but a way to really understand a problem that ultimately could lead to business results, but you have to start with the problem first.
Absolutely. A well-defined problem is half solved.
Yes.
Right? So that's how we learned when we grew up. It's very interesting. Long back, I think years back, I used to be a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. I used to have a Black Belt champion who used to always coach me. When we write down the problem statement and take it to the person, he reads the problem statement and say, this is not getting me tears in my eyes. This is not the right problem statement. Go rewrite it. So till the problem statement is so painful, he used to make me write the problem statement again and again. I think the message in there is that if you can get the problem statement written down in a way that it has a clear outcomes, it has a clear business connection and impact it can make, then you can then start putting the solution in place.
Correct.
Most of the organizations in the new tech world, right, they jump onto the technology solution thinking that it can now solve. AI, how most of you build AI models, I'm assuming, right? This is a question for the audience. To chance to win the book, even if you answer wrong, I'll give you the book. When you build any machine learning model, you need 2 types of data sets, correct? Are you sure with that? One is called testing data. Do you know what is the other category of the data? Who said that? Excellent.
Learning data,
you can take
I think
the
somebody
book.
said. Yeah, learning data.
Yeah, she said learning data. Learning data and training data to the model, is very, very important. The reason I bring up that is when you are looking at building the model, if you don't have testing data, learning or training, teaching data, you should not even start thinking of building a machine learning model, because when you get to the model development, you have one set of data and you will start compromising, moving some of the testing data into the learning data or training data, then your model won't work. How do you get that? Because you don't know whether the problem that you want, for which you are building the machine learning model, is indeed a critical business problem. If it is critical business problem, there will be sufficient amount of data where you can cluster the data into 2 sets. In the absence of that, you will build the model with the same test data and you use the same data to train, your model will brilliantly work. That's not how you build the model. That's the key aspect. So I've just explained that with the technical lens, right? If you translate that to business, getting the business problem, understanding the why we are building a machine learning model or an AI recommendation engine is very important.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'll be thinking of your question. I'll throw one more out there, and then we'll open it up. But my observation in my own limited experience, I'm nowhere near an expert like you are, but the clean data is the fuel, right? And those foundational items like process cleanup, making sure you're not trying to optimize a inefficient process, or the tech debt's getting in your way, or you have the wrong data sets that ultimately won't lead you to anything. More inefficiencies, as you would say, right? So foundationally, cleaning up the process and making sure the data sets are in place and accessible by the model, and then of course implementing it and testing it to see if you can get ultimately to the desired results and the predictability that you hope to achieve. That is critical. And I think that's a lesson for a lot of folks, is instead of just jumping right into AI and ML, you don't need to do that, right? There's a lot of things that can be done without it. And you're certainly, even if the desire's there, if you don't have those right foundational elements, you're wasting time anyway. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have an analogy for that. I used to tell to my team, assume that you have a severe headache, and if you go to a doctor and says, you know what, today I don't have a nice headache medicines, but I have this nice, very well looking medicine that will cure stomach pain, can you please take it? You will never do that, because if the model doesn't address the pain that you are looking for, it's no use. So it's very important to make sure that the type of model, the type of selection, the data, what is the selection criteria? I have in my book we have a section where we write down selection criteria, techniques that you need to apply to 1, model selection, 2, data selection, 3, prioritization, 4x4 matrix to say complexity of the problem to the return on investment, effort that you want to spend on building the model to what benefits you can get. All of this very clearly elaborated in the book to talk through every solution that you want to do. So you may want to refer to that. But to your point, that whole structured process and making sure that we get that step by step right is very important.
For sure. Questions from the audience?
All right.
I have one. Comcast internet customer, TV customer, when they redid their customer service model in light of how poorly they were viewed, wasn't it Pegasystems that you used to tie those various billing, installation, customer service questions together?
Did you say Pegasus?
Yeah, I thought Pegasystems.
Well, I don't, that name doesn't ring a bell, and I can't speak to the specifics of what was done. That wasn't in I'm on the Comcast business side, so what I can tell you, there was certainly a lot of effort around pulling different data stores together to get an accurate picture of a customer's journey. So instead of a bunch of discrete systems that a service representative may have to pull from here and then swivel over here, et cetera, pulling it in to create a visualization of what a customer may have experienced in the last 3 months. And some of that was visual, some of it was data oriented, but for a customer service representative, it certainly made their job a lot easier to be able to kind of get inside the shoes, so to speak, of a customer and see what they've gone through over the last X period of time. And that's proven really effective. You're welcome. Anybody else?
So you mentioned AI, and I'll have two questions real quick, so I'll put them together real quick. From an AI perspective, looking at sentiment analysis for Comcast business users, understanding how they use conditions, their satisfaction of the experience, speed, power, the passion of the internet structure that can deliver the business needs. Do you guys have a plan of action in place to measure that? And then my second part question would be putting an AI engine in to measure the actual OLT and ONT layer all the way back into from the set-top box at the business, all the way back into the layer to understand that load and congestion layer to take an automated response to change networking routing, BGP and whatnot. Are you guys looking at those two situations?
Well, there's a lot of journeys and areas of the network and customer-facing elements that we're looking at and actively evolving and in many cases implemented. We look at it in a couple different ways. One is, what does a customer, a user experience? And that could be a UI through an app, it could be through the device and what that. Then there's also, you mix in Wi-Fi, right? Wi-Fi is a very difficult challenge for all kinds of reasons. Distance from the AP, the access point, distance from the modem or gateway. Is a customer using our access point, or are they using a third-party access point? What are the performance parameters of what service they're actually pulling down? Is maybe Google's having an outage, or AWS is down or something. It has nothing to do with that, right? So understanding that a little bit more, but also from the gateway into the core of the network and understanding the various parameters there. And yes, we're doing a lot of work in that area to be able to predict of these umpteen number of parameters that could be available to us. What are those ones that are likely going to lead a customer to say, gosh, my internet connectivity is intermittent, or I'm unable to connect? Can we be more predictive in that way? And that's a big way that we're considering the use of automation and AI, ML, and such. And it's proving effective. The big challenge for any business at scale is getting predictability right? You can't guess. You can't be, predicting 50% of the time is, 50% of the time you make the customer experience worse. Right. 50% of the time maybe you make somebody happy. It has to be better than that. And, a lot of data has to be kind of run through and considered until you get to the predictability where you feel comfortable that I could reach out to you proactively and say, I think you have a problem and here's exactly how to fix it. And that's where we ultimately see ourselves going, but it's never as simple as you would hope it would be. But the company is just really working diligently and investing heavily in that space to get to that point.
Right.
So, RP, I wanted to just talk to you about your stair-step chart. And in its foundation, it says that it's tools-driven. Above that says individual automation, and then you move up to optimize process-driven.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to just ask you to go through that again, because in my head, I'm thinking that individual automation piece suggests individual, addressing the individual specific considerations in the process, rather than first thinking about what should the process be, and then having the individual right within that process.
Good point. Thanks for asking that question. What happens in any enterprise today is there is already tools, right? There are a lot of tools, a lot of script-based solutions, and people have built individual task level automations for them. like the scripts in JavaScript or macros that they build, and then those are what I mean by step 1. That means people individually thinking about automation and doing that. That is why it is just the foundation. There is nothing in the organization as a structure, but people have some broken automation here and there solutions. But they will all have tools. That is why it is a foundation. So when you go to the process and optimization step, that is when you look at, do we have right tools? Do we have a structured organization construct? Do we have a right processes? That's the switch. The individualization there is by the people. Yeah.
And so as a startup and having less process and fewer tools that we develop over time, I feel like in some of our processes, we don't actually have them. So we're talking about what is that process overall. So it feels reasonable that in some of our processes, I don't have to think about automation because we really don't have those individual tools.
You will, okay, fine. It also depends upon the context, right? This is my experience. In our experience, every organization will have, when I say tool, even my Outlook calendar automation is a tool for me. So I think you will have something to that extent. Yeah. So that's what I meant. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
We have some time still. Anybody else?
Okay, please.
So I'm just wondering how, like, what recommendations would you have for dealing with employees who don't see themselves in the space of automation? So my degrees are in communication and English. I don't necessarily feel like I fit in this space because of the way that I've, from a career pathing perspective, not currently, but automation's always just been this technology, science degree that you need to have. But I feel like what we're saying now is that it's more inclusive. So how do we get our employees to feel like they are part of this, if that makes sense? So it's not just unique to having a tech degree that, so I don't know from a Comcast perspective or with RP, like what recommendations would you have?
Okay. You want me to go first?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
And I'll chime in.
So
as
it's
well.
a very important question, and that is one of my favorite topic though. In my book, the first chapter talks about how we implemented automation for media and the press and the editors and the writers of the media, how they do automation. When we talk about automation, there are two actors. Actor one is people who need automation, the need actor, and the second person is the person who automates. So we don't need to worry about how and who automates, because that's the technology lens. But the lens on which what needs to be automated and why I need, that can come from anyone. I'll give you an example that we used to work with a large automotive manufacturer in Europe. When we wanted to implement automation, there was a lot of resistance in, we don't want to do it, this doesn't work, this doesn't help. So what we did is we got everyone into design thinking room. Design thinking is a very structured process. But essentially what we told them is, from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock when you come into the factory, what are the things that you do? List down all the tasks that anybody can do because it's their own job. Now we gave them post-its that say smiley face and grumpy face and I don't like face, and we told them that in all of these actions that you do from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, what are the things that you love it, you like it, so put a smiley face post-it on that. What are the things that you don't like it, put a grumpy face on that. At the end of after 2 hours, we said, all these things that you listed yourself, you don't like it anyway. So shall we go ahead and automate them? Everybody is on board, right? That's a very simple yet powerful to get everybody onboarded onto the thinking.
Yeah, it's a great question, and like you, I'm not an engineer. I work with a lot of engineers, and I'm always fascinated, and I always try to learn from them. But understand that, the best products, services, innovation typically happens when it's not there's a combination of people who understand technology, they understand perhaps product, they understand the business, and someone who understands design and how to create something that's valuable for the targeted audience. And you remove one of those elements, and the outcome is not going to be as good. So I always encourage, work with the engineers and work with the designers. If you're more of a business person, it's a combination of people that are going to ultimately create great outcomes. The second thing I would add is, and this is you framed it so well in your book. If you look at the history of automation, we typically think faster scale, higher quality product, and in some cases even the removal of OpEx or humans, right, in the process, right? But now this automation is more about for the human and for us to be empowered to make better decisions and devise, perhaps new business opportunities. And that's what's pretty exciting about this. So you are a user of the technology, and you and your partners who are the technical folks that may be implementing this, work together because they can't do it without you, and you can't do it without them. So it's designed for us to consume, not for designed to eliminate human jobs. So yeah, it's really neat.
All right, I
think we're up for time, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.